First, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Tom Schuba. Tom is the Assistant Criminal Justice Editor at the Chicago Sun-Times. He began his career there as an overnight crime reporter after serving on as an investigative intern at NBC. An award-winning journalist, he earned a National Headliner Award for a series of stories investigating the state's troubled cannabis testing regulations. And now on to our speaker. Larry Snelling is the first superintendent in CPD history to be nominated by the newly formed Community Commission on Public Safety and Accountability, the Police Oversight Civilian Review Board. The former chief of the Bureau of Counterterrorism was then nominated by Mayor Brandon Johnson to be superintendent, and last September he was approved at a 48-0 vote by the Chicago City Council. He leads a staff of over 14,000 employees and a budget close to $2 million, making CPD the second largest police force behind New York City. A product of the Englewood neighborhood and Chicago Public Schools, Superintendent Snelling attended DePaul University, where he received a BA in adult education. In 1992, at age 23, he returned to Englewood to be a patrol officer. He is currently a candidate for a master's in ethical leadership at the University of Chicago. He's had over 30 years in various leadership roles at CPD, and that includes serving as an instructor and sergeant at the Police Training Academy, where he redesigned the use of force training model around national best practices. We're honored to welcome to the Economic Club Chicago Police Department Superintendent Larry Snelling.
Good afternoon. Oh, come on now. Good afternoon. If you've ever seen me do this, I do it twice just to make sure everybody's awake. First of all, thank you. Thank you to the Economic Club for holding this event. It's good to be here with everybody. I'd like to thank President David Snyder, Vice President Katie Esposito, and Vice President Lisa Emmerich. I'd like to first start by thanking my officers with the Chicago Police Department and the work that they're doing. I say that because it's important to understand the direction that we're trending. I'll go over some numbers and just tell you how we ended the year in 2023 and what we're doing in 2024. I know that there are going to be some questions here, and I'm ready to answer those questions, put some things to rest, but I can guarantee you that our officers are working hard. As you know, and we've talked about this before, that ending 2023, we reduced homicides by 92. So we had 92 less homicides last year than we had in 2022 at the same time. We had 379 less shooting victims. Now that's nearly 400 families less affected by someone who was either shot or murdered. We know how that affects families. We see it every day. Our detective division follows up. What we're doing and what we started doing last year with the detective division, because we've heard the voices of people, they wanted our detective division to reach out, give them updates on their cases and their family members. From that, we've created the Family Liaison Program, where we're reaching out to families and actually holding events with the children of family members who have been affected by homicides. It's been great events, great events. So what I can tell you is moving into 2024 in the month of January, right now we've reduced homicides by 40%. We're down 15 homicides in the month of January from the same time last year. We've reduced shootings by 38%. Our shooting victims are down by 40%. Our vehicular hijackings, we've cut that in half, a 53% reduction. Now, as you know, the vehicular hijackings, That has been a very scary thing. Now, I'll tell you this right now. I know I'm reading these numbers out to you, but we are trending in the right direction. But we also understand that there are people who have still been affected, and we're going to continue to work for those people. Motor vehicle thefts. We know that vehicles are being stolen to be used in secondary crimes, such as armed robberies, which I know everybody in the room is concerned about, so are we, other vehicular hijackings, and other crimes like smash and grabs that has affected you downtown and across the city. I'm happy to say right now that this time last year, we had over 2,600 vehicles stolen in the city of Chicago. We've cut that number in half. So right now, we've reduced vehicle thefts by a total number of 1,200. So we're almost at a 50% reduction. Now, you can correlate that with the reduction in shootings and robberies. Our robberies are down over 200 right now. So we're down about 38% in robberies. Still, there are too many robberies right now. A lot of the robberies that you see happening right now is juvenile offenders, repeat offenders, and we see it over and over again. This is why it's important that we're all here so that we can start to talk about what we can do to affect these young people so that they don't fall into this lifestyle, so that they are not the next murderer, or they're not the next individual who's murdered. So we have to pay attention to that. It's very important. So for our robberies, what we're doing right now is we're doing something that we haven't done before. Within the Chicago Police Department, each bureau was usually siloed. We had the Bureau of Detectives, we had the Bureau of Counterterrorism, and we had the Bureau of Patrol, and everybody kind of did their own thing. But what we're doing right now is having everyone work in lockstep with each other. We're sharing information, we're using technology. That information across borders, districts, our SDSC rooms, our team at counterterrorism, our federal partners, our state partners, and our partners at the county. We have worked together on vehicular hijackings when we developed our vehicular hijacking team, which it's done an excellent job at reducing vehicular hijacking and making arrests for the same. We've pushed this forward, and I can tell you this right now, and before the question is even asked, I'm going to tell you, I've met with State's Attorney Fox. We've had some really good meetings about what we need to do moving forward. We're going to have monthly meetings to talk about cases and charges. So if anybody has that question, asked and answered right now, right? So we're doing great things, right? So I'm looking forward to continuing that relationship. When we talk about organized retail crimes, we have our retail team in place, made over 187 arrests, and have recovered $3.8 million in proceeds. And most of that has been returned back to your businesses. In the upcoming year, we're going to build upon that and continue to build. The upcoming year, 2024, is going to be challenging. Probably the most challenging year that I've seen on the department. And I was the commander of Englewood through civil unrest. That lasted a couple of weeks, tapered off a little bit. But what's going to happen this summer with the Democratic National Convention coming, along with NASCAR, something that we saw last year, which was very successful, but we have other major events, Pride Parade, Lollapalooza, Bud Billiken, Aaron Water Show, and I can go on and on. What I will tell you is that we've prepared for these things. When it comes to the Democratic National Convention, I want everybody in here to rest assured that we are working to make sure that this city is safe and we have the best convention that we can possibly have. When we found out that we were getting the convention, we started training right away. We had about a year to prepare. That's not a lot of time. So I can tell you this, my experience with the NATO event in 2012, we started preparing in 2011. We looked at best practices. We looked at where other cities went wrong. We looked at where we went wrong. We had an event in 2002 where we were sued for $6.7 million. We looked at everything that we did wrong there in that lawsuit. And what we did is trained around it. We trained our officers, we trained everybody on, First Amendment, and we were prepared. When we were done with the NATO event and the clash on 22nd Street, there was minimal damage to the city. Besides a little graffiti, there was no serious damage done, and there was a limited number of complaints and lawsuits against our members. And it's simply because we were prepared. And we will continue to prepare. I've been asked multiple times, what is it that we can do to help the department? Well, I'm not going to turn down anything. So here's what I'll tell you. And Mr. Eric Smith is there from the Civic Committee. They have an initiative that they're putting together. And if you could please help with funding, it's going to help our department. There are things that we need to do internally for officer wellness. It's actually part of the consent decree, which we've made great progress on, which I want to continue to do. When we talk about officer wellness, it's important to understand this. The reason our officers are working harder right now, they have their days off. They're getting more time off. But moving forward for the DNC in this upcoming summer, we know there are going to be day off cancellations, so we're going to have to keep a close eye on our officers, and we're going to have to focus on officer wellness. Besides that, there are programs that we want to get our officers involved in when it comes to the youth in the city of Chicago. If we do not get to the youth young, if we don't get them when they're children, everything else will get them. Social media, gangs, crime. They'll fall into a lifestyle where we're going to have to take corrective action. They'll get arrested, shot at, murdered, or they'll become shooters or murderers. We have to get to our children. We have officers who are already doing the work. We want to expand upon that. So when we talk, we'll talk about those initiatives. I will push those forward so that everybody has a clear understanding of what it is the Chicago Police Department is trying to do. We want to do our part. We cannot arrest our way out of this situation. We're not going to try. What we want to do is start to develop those relationships with our community members. This is going to help us clear crimes. Right now, and I have to give credit to Chief Ursitti of the Detective Division, who's made great strides with the FLO program. Right now, our clearance rates for homicides is at 74%. That's higher than any time that I could ever think of since I've been on this job. So our officers are working, our detectives are working, and we're going to continue to work. And right now, I look forward to taking questions from everyone here. So thank you for having me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Schuba. I'm a reporter and editor with the Sun-Times. I don't typically wear a suit, as the state's attorney said. I don't know if that's a dig on my fashion sense or something, but nevertheless. Soup, it was kind of a love fest You went through this first of its kind search. You came out on top. You went through the city council. There was really no resistance at those hearings. You were lauded by alders across the board. But you come in after a pretty tumultuous tenure of David Brown. We saw a historic spike in homicides. We saw some policy failures from him. What went wrong during that tenure, and what are you going to do differently here?
You know, it's really hard to say, to put it on one thing when we talk about what went wrong. One of the things that went wrong was the way that our officers felt they were being treated. The cancellation of days off, things of that nature affected the department terribly. Morale dropped. And when you have low morale, especially with a job like this, dealing with civil unrest, which had a lot to do with the spike in crime also, officers didn't feel supported. They were getting a lot of negativity from the media. They were getting it from their families, family members, social media. And then internally, with their the day off cancellations, they had no time to decompress. And simply just giving those officers a little time to decompress, spend time with their families, had a great effect on how the officers decided to come back to work and start working again, right, to build that morale. It's important to understand that when you're dealing with officers, you're dealing with human beings. We oftentimes talk about those who have engaged in crime, and some of them very heinous crime, and we talk about the reentry programs. We talk about the second chances. We talk about the mistakes that these individuals made. Well, it's the same thing with our officers. Those are human beings, and at times they make mistakes. At times they become emotional. There are things that affect our officers, and those things are the same thing that affects the general public. It has to be understood that we have to treat our officers the same way we want to see everyone else treated. However, I do understand that we have a great responsibility, and with that responsibility comes accountability. And we do have to hold our officers accountable for the decisions that they make. However, we do have to set them up to win also.
So, there was an incident last Friday. It was a pretty brazen shooting not too far from here. I think it's unnerved a lot of people in this room. The Tribune editorial board questioned why you didn't show up to the scene to talk to the media and answer questions. Why didn't you?
I'm the superintendent of police. What I want to do is build those around me. If I have to go to every single scene, then I'm not developing my leadership. The Deputy Chief John Hines, very capable individual and very capable of handling that scene. He kept me abreast of everything that was going on. I was in several meetings at that time, and I wanted Deputy Chief John Hines to stand there in front of the media and give a report out on what occurred. And the reason I wanted him to give a report out on what occurred, and I wanted him to do it immediately, because I wanted to reduce the fears that this was a random shooting or there was someone downtown running around shooting people. This was an incident where two individuals were targeted. And we know that, and the information that we've gathered since tells us that. So we just wanted to make sure that the general public understood that there was no further danger when it involved this particular shooting. So I can't be at every scene. Obviously, this was a tragic accident, a tragic incident with the loss of life of these two juveniles, these two individuals. That's kind of what I talked about before. But at the same time, our officers can't be everywhere. But when we arrive, are we responding the way that we need to respond? I can tell you right now, we've got some great leadership down there. I want to continue to develop our leadership team, because when we look over the last 2 to 3 years, how promotions were made, I'm doing interviews. I'm talking to people. I'm having conversations. I want to put the best people in the best possible places. And in order to do that, you have to have trust. If I don't trust the individuals that I'm putting in these roles, they're never going to lead. If I have to micromanage them, if I have to do everything myself, then why do I need to build a leadership team? I have to build a leadership team because we have 14,000 members of the Chicago Police Department. I need people who can step in when I'm not there.
So to switch gears a little bit here, yesterday your boss, Mayor Brandon Johnson, told WBEZ and the Sun-Times that he's going to move to pull all CPD officers out of CPS schools. Do you think this is the right move?
Here's how I'll answer that question. We've had school resource officers who have done a great job dealing with kids in school. My mentor was a school resource officer, Officer Thomas. I was a student at Englewood High School, came from a single parent home, and Officer Thomas served as a father figure, not only for me, but for other kids who were like me within that school. It was a great relationship. He was a great leader for us. It was a different time. If you weren't in class, he'd give you a little smack upside the head and make you go to class. Obviously, we don't do that now, right? But we understood. There was nothing disrespectful about it. He was just concerned, and he wanted to make sure that we got to class and that we were doing what we were supposed to do. He didn't hurt us. It was just a reminder that if I see you standing in the hall and you're supposed to be in school, you're going to get another one of those, right? We appreciated it. And to this day, here we are 40 years later, and I'm still talking about Officer Thomas and the effect he had on me. However, what I can tell you is this. This is a decision that's made outside of the Chicago Police Department. But when it comes to the schools, when we talk about safe passage, our officers will be there. During school dismissals, our officers will be there, especially at the schools where we know that we've had some problems with fights, violence, things of that nature. We do it anyway. So we'll adjust. We're not going to be offended because we're voted out of the schools. We're just going to continue to do the work that we do and make sure that these kids are safe.
Could it potentially strain resources, though? Have you seen that so far, where schools have pulled out these SROs, these resource officers, and then you have to essentially have calls for service to the school for behavioral issues, where you're not exactly having planning around staffing in those cases?
Well, when it comes to behavioral issues, the schools have a lot of internal staff who deal with that. What we don't want to do as the police is show up every time in school when someone is acting out, and it can be handled at a level that the police don't have to get involved. It wouldn't necessarily be a strain on resources because we do this all the time anyway. So when it comes to school dismissals, we always make sure that we have at least a car or several cars outside of that school during dismissals because we want those students to get home safely. So it wouldn't be a major change. It's just that the officers are not assigned inside of the school anymore.
So the city council just again deferred a vote on this arbitration ruling that would allow officers to have their most serious disciplinary cases heard behind closed doors. Obviously, you're a party already to a lawsuit that's pending here, but can you kind of give us your perspective on what's happening with this battle over arbitration versus the police board?
Well, the battle is the battle. They're going to continue to have this discussion. Here's what I will tell you. For me, it doesn't matter if it's the police board. It doesn't matter if it's arbitration. I like transparency, and I'll tell you why I like transparency. Because you get to hear the entire story. There are times that you may hear a story or you may read a headline, and I'm sure everybody in this room has read a headline, and then you read the story and the headline has absolutely nothing to do with what the story is telling you. When we have a police-involved shooting, oftentimes you hear the police shot and killed someone, but we don't know the entire story behind it. And that entire story needs to be told. And when that entire story is told, then we can talk about the details of that particular shooting. That not only informs the public of what happened, it puts the truth out there, and it can either determine how, if the force that the officer used was a justified use of force or not. So I believe that it all should be transparent. I don't believe in anything needing to be behind closed doors because I don't believe that we should have anything to hide.
So, Soup, I'd like to pivot back to something that you were discussing, crime trends, and kind of touch on some of these specific points that you were going through, starting off with shootings and homicides. We've seen a continued decrease, yet our levels remain far higher than other big cities like New York and Los Angeles. In your opinion, what are the key factors contributing to gun violence? And what's being done to address the entrenched violence in these small amounts of neighborhoods that are contributing mostly to this?
So there are a couple of things. And when we talk about the violence that we have in the city of Chicago, our gang issue is different and more difficult than anywhere else in the entire country. It's one of the most complicated. We lack the structure that other cities have amongst their gangs. We have numerous gang factions. When I was the commander of Englewood, just in Englewood, there were 65 gang factions in that small little area. So imagine the conflict. So even if we had, just a conflict between each gang, we're sitting on 32 conflicts, right? Where these individuals are shooting at each other. Social media attacks, social media beefs. These individuals are talking to each other on social media, they're posting things, they're insulting each other, and then it ends up in a shooting. So that's the difficult part of what's going on here. That's one. But from our side, our approach, why we're starting to see things trend down is because we're not just throwing officers at it. We're planning around these issues. We have team members working together. We've developed teams around robbery. We've developed teams around retail theft. We've also developed teams around vehicular hijackings. They're working together. We're sharing information. We're not only working with our federal partners, but we're working with our local partners, the state police. We're working with the county police. I don't see him here. Leo is usually everywhere. He's probably somewhere in the kitchen. So, but he's a great asset for us. So he's been helping us a lot. We're also working with our surrounding suburbs, because we're seeing those vehicular hijackings, vehicle thefts, and robberies coming in from the suburbs and going back out. So that teamwork has really helped. Moving forward, having sat down with the state's attorney, and I know that there are a lot of times that people, well, what about the state's attorney? Well, we've arrested people and they were charged, but they're back out immediately, so that's not on the state's attorney's office, right? These are people who are not being held accountable for some of the most heinous crimes, vehicular hijackings, robberies, aggravated battery, shootings. And they're back out there. Some of them are on electronic monitoring, and they do it all over again. So that's one of the things that we're combating. But our officers are working. They're not disgruntled. It becomes frustrating at times that when you lock someone up and then you see them back out there again. Just last night, we had 3 individuals on the CTA commit a robbery with a knife. 2 people. Our officers communicated with each other through the SDSC rooms. They knew where these individuals were going on the train. They identified the cart, and once that cart opened, we had officers standing on the platform waiting to take them into custody. This is the kind of work that we're doing right now, and that's why you're starting to see the decreases in crime.
So you were touting the homicide clearance rate. You said it's somewhere in the 70s.
Yes.
Now that includes the exceptional clearances, correct?
No. I knew that question was coming.
So 70%. So you're saying 70% of homicides are resulting in an arrest?
These are arrests that have been made this year.
And none were exceptionally closed because the prime suspect died?
No, because there's a couple that have happened from last year when we talk about those exceptionally clear closed cases. But these are cases where individuals have been arrested and charged.
What about non-fatal shootings? That clearance rate has historically been abysmal. Where is that now?
It's higher. Right now, as a matter of fact, it's up. I don't have the exact percentage on that right now, but I can tell you right now, there's been an increase in clearance rates, not only in shootings, aggravated batteries, aggravated assaults, but also criminal sexual assaults. So we are seeing an uptick in clearance rates in these things. And I think, and I don't think, I believe that it's because of our outreach now to the community. Having a further reach to the community, those members are starting to trust. And we're starting to gain that trust, and they're more willing to give us information now and talk to us. We can only gain information from individuals if they're going to trust us. Because these people live in some very volatile neighborhoods, and they're in very dangerous situations when they come forward. We have to get them to believe that we have their best interests in mind. And if we don't do that, we're not going to get that information.
So overall, last year, robberies are up, but carjackings are down. Both huge concern. These are happening in neighborhoods across the city. They're seemingly random. They can turn violent very quickly. What's being done to disrupt these sprees that we keep hearing about? There'll be 12 robberies overnight. How do you cut those off and hold people accountable?
So this is a part of the plan, and it's a part of an entire plan. Number one, reduce the number of cars that are being stolen. Now, what we've identified is that Kias and Hyundais are being stolen at a ridiculous rate. Those vehicles are used in secondary crimes. We've reached out to Hyundai. We've reached out to Kia. We're working with them right now to try to equip these vehicles with, or update them so that they're not so easily stolen. We're making a little way with that. Moving forward, when we talk about the sprees, this is now where technology comes into play. We have LPR readers that we're looking at, our SDSC rooms, our ATC rooms with the detective division. When we see an initial robbery, we then push that information to the surrounding districts because we know that there's a possibility that they're going to another district to commit a robbery. We've had great success with that where we've caught people on robbery sprees. Now, one of the things that we've done is that we've used the use of the helicopter. The helicopter has been very effective with air support because now once we identify someone in a vehicle, we don't have to pursue on the ground. We can just follow. That air support tells us exactly where they're going. And what we've been able to do is find where they go, where they stop, and where they go in. And at this point, if we have to get a search warrant or whatever we need to do, we go in and we arrest these individuals. We also were able to get the proceeds from these robberies. One of the difficult things that we run into at times is that They're wearing masks on some of these robberies, and they can't be identified by some of the victims. So we've run into that problem, but we document who they are. We've recovered proceeds, the vehicle that they were using, and we know who we're dealing with at this point.
Right. I mean, what's interesting to me, I recently saw a dossier for a robbery crew or an alleged robbery crew, and it had the names and faces of all the suspects. It had where they hang out. It even had the mom of a couple of these guys. Why is it so difficult to take them into custody and to hold them accountable and to work with Kim Foxx, State's Attorney Foxx, to charge them?
Well, it's about evidence. You know, we can look at what someone writes online, but that's not necessarily enough evidence to charge them. When we find evidence of a crime, because someone can take credit for a crime they didn't commit. We have people who call in and say things like that all the time. We need the evidence. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not utilizing that information, because anything that we see on open source social media, we look at. And what we do is build strategies around that also, right? There are threats in open source social media. So if we know that there's a threat from one gang to another, this is now a time for us to get our resources to those locations. One of the things that we do in the SDSC room is that we research that open source social media. We also look at gunfire, places where we see conflict between individuals, and we know that this is a place where a lot of shots are fired or people are actually being shot. This is now where we pour our resources. If it's predictable, it's preventable. So if we have information, we can get out in front of it. And if we can get out in front of it, we can prevent it. The problem is, with prevention, you can't measure it. So we don't know that when our officers pull over a vehicle with 4 individuals with masks, and we get 4 guns out of that car, we have no idea how many robberies we stopped. We have no idea how many lives we may have saved at that very moment. But we find a way internally to make sure that our officers understand how appreciated they are for saving lives.
Now, there's been some discussion recently about, a vehicle pursuit policy was put into effect. There has been, year after year, huge amounts of settlements related to police crashes. Now there's discussion about relaxing that policy to go after carjackers, robbers, people like this. Do you think that's the appropriate move at this point?
Here's the problem. When people talk about the vehicle pursuit policy, the first thing they think is that, the police can't pursue anymore. It's not what the policy says. The policy says that an officer is supposed to weigh the balancing test, and the officer should weigh the balancing test. One of the things that you'll find is that when an officer pursues someone, it's not the reckless driving of the officer, but the reckless driving of the person being pursued. Now, if the risk to the public during this pursuit outweighs the need to immediately catch this individual, then that officer should terminate that pursuit. A supervisor should terminate that pursuit, because what we don't want to do is that we're chasing someone who committed a property crime or robbed someone, and we know the person who's being robbed wants us to catch that individual. However, if we know that that person is driving recklessly and could run into a crowd and kill 3 or 4 other people, we don't want to be responsible for that, and we shouldn't be. The other thing is this: if that happens, now the taxpayers are on the hook, excuse me, for whatever that settlement is going to be when the lawsuit comes down. It's always going to come back to the Chicago Police Department. It's always going to come back to the pursuing officers. So it doesn't matter if it's the pursuing officers who get into an accident or the person being pursued. It's always going to fall back on us. So air support right now is the best way to pursue someone in the vehicle. It's been very effective for us, and that's why right now we're working on trying to build a fleet of helicopters.
So, kind of to move to something else here, I'm wondering if you can give us some goals for the year, deliverable goals in terms of numbers. You were talking about decreases from last year, the number of homicides. We got down to 500 homicides in 2019. What number of homicides would you like to see this year?
0. I would love to see 0 this year.
But you've already
Yeah.
lost out there.
Yeah, well, right now I think we're at 26. I'd like to see 26. Here's the issue with that. I don't like to put numbers on things, especially when it comes to lives, because when you put numbers on it, I think you're being dismissive of the people who have lost their lives. I can say that we were at 500 homicides now compared to 800 in 2020. That's a huge decrease, and that's great for the 300 less people who could have been victims of homicide. But we still have to be aware and keep a focus that there are 500 people who lost their lives. What's important to me right now is to make sure that we do every single thing that we can to keep it as low as possible. So right now, I wouldn't want to put a number on that. I've heard that done before, and it didn't end well. So, what's important to me right now is that our officers are working their fingers to the bone to make sure that this city is safe and they're saving lives.
Now, so what do you say to the people who don't feel safe?
You know, it's not a whole lot you can say to people that don't feel safe, because when you watch the news, when you talk to your friends and they can tell you stories about how they were attacked or how they were robbed or they were riding the train, they didn't feel safe. The only thing that I can tell you is this: our officers will be working to protect this city. We're going to do every single thing that we can to make sure that our law-abiding, tax-paying citizens who just want to go to work every day, go home, they want to see their children ride their bikes on the street safely, we are going to be working our fingers to the bone for everybody in this city to make sure that the city is safe. And not just one part of the city. We're not just going to focus on this neighborhood or that. We are the city of Chicago, and this crime affects everyone. And where we don't reduce crime in one place, we're going to see it grow somewhere else, because we've already seen that. We're seeing crime in places throughout this city that we haven't seen before. So until we start working on neighborhoods and start working in communities and addressing the root causes of these issues, because we do have to address the root causes. Because the question is this: if I lock up a young person for committing a violent crime, what do I do to stop that person from engaging in that same crime again? What resources are in place that when this person goes back to that community or goes back to that neighborhood, that they don't engage in these same types of crime? Or do we put them in an environment now where they become bigger, stronger, faster, and now we put them back into that community with no resources, and now it's worse? So we need to bring resources to these communities. We need to start at the level of babies in these communities so that we now start to build these communities in a way that these children have something else to look forward to. That the things that they see in their communities, they understand that that's not the only thing in life and there are alternatives. And when we bring something like that to the communities, that's where we now start to see some of the crime go down, because this isn't going to change overnight. This is a generational thing. And when we want to see a major turnaround in this city, it's going to take years. But we can start now, and if we can dig into this and reduce this crime in a way that's going to be effective for everyone, I believe people will then start to feel safer.
Kind of a related question. A lot of people in this room have real concerns about the city's reputation. They have to attract top-tier talent here. They have to grow their businesses. What are you doing to help shift that perception, and what do you have to say to these folks in this room?
Well, here's the first thing that I'm going to say this to everybody in the room because I've said this before. No nonsense. You've seen the teen trends because that's the thing that, that you can turn on Fox News right now and they're probably still showing one from 2022, right? But you haven't seen as much of those teen trends lately. The reason you haven't seen as much of those teen trends lately is because we've joined with CPS, we've joined with outreach groups who have a relationship with some of these kids, and we as the police are out there, our community policing team. When we get information that there's going to be a teen trend, we get there before they do. Now, what we're careful about is you could have a group of teens, great kids who just want to go downtown and enjoy the sights, and we don't want to violate their rights. However, when we see a group of kids who start to engage in criminal activity, we are going to take them into custody. And we're going to take them to the station, we're going to call their parents, and we're going to have their parents come and get them. It's been effective. One of the things that is a myth is that all of these kids who are down here are just, impoverished kids who have nothing else better to do. A lot of these kids go down there on ride share, so somebody's got a credit card, okay? And a lot of times their parents don't even know that they're down there, right? Or the parents dropped them off. They thought they were going to a movie theater. But these kids are coordinating with each other to go down and wreak havoc on the city. And what they do is they post it on social media. So they're trying to become social media famous. So what we've done is that we've made sure that they understand that if you commit a crime, no matter how minor, we're going to take you into custody, we're going to take you to the station, and your parents are going to have to come and pick you up. It's been effective. We're going to continue to do that. You've seen the protests across the city. In preparing for the Democratic National Convention, these are all tests for how we're going to respond as the police. We've seen a couple of incidents where they've taken over the expressway or Lakeshore Drive. That's not something that we're going to tolerate. We've had conversations with them. We're going to continue to have conversations with them. We've made arrests in those situations also. We're not going to, listen, wait, I'm a strong believer in the First Amendment, and we're going to protect everyone's First Amendment rights. But when you start to infringe upon everyone else's rights, it becomes a problem. We're not going to tolerate violence. We're not going to tolerate issues where people can't get to their children, they can't get to the hospital, the ambulance can't get through. This has a ripple effect on people within our city. So when we look at our protests that we've had here, we're well above what's happening in other cities with the protests, taking over the bridges, throwing their keys over into the water, spending an entire day trying to tow cars out of locations, gluing themselves to the street. Trust me, there's sleeping dragons. I'm sure that you may not be familiar with that term, but it's when someone cements themselves and someone else into an apparatus that they have to be cut out of. Those are all issues that are happening across the country. But right now, we've had a very good relationship with these protest groups. They've been very large, but it hasn't broken out in violence. So some situations get volatile, but I think we're doing a great job, and our officers are doing a great job of keeping that calm.
So, Sue, when we talked last week, you were telling me that you have a new strategic plan specifically for downtown. Can you explain what that plan entails and how it's designed to support businesses?
Here's the deal when it comes to SDI, our overtime initiative for downtown. We have officers sitting in cars. I don't want officers sitting in cars. I don't want officers sitting in cars with lights flashing. I want officers moving around. I want officers mingling. I want officers walking into businesses and having conversations with business owners. I want them talking to the people. I want people to know that our officers are interacting with them and that the interaction is mutual. I've been to meetings, community meetings, not just something like this, but on the west side, on the south side. Everybody's saying the same thing. I just want to talk to an officer. I want to have a conversation with an officer. You know, it would make me feel a lot more comfortable. So our officers will be giving you information. They will be keeping everyone informed on what it is we're doing. If there's something going on downtown, we will send that information out to everyone as alerts, just to get you to understand what's happening. If we're making arrests in cases where we know that you're worried about what's going on, we will be getting that information to you. We're already having these conversations with the alders to get that information out to their constituents, and we're going to make sure that we're an open source of communication for everyone here.
No, Super, they're getting the hook out for me here, but I would be remiss not to ask one last question. You have some pretty major vacancies within the department. Mm-hmm. You have no first deputy, you have no patrol chief, you have no reform chief. I know Fred Waller is helping out, but when are you going to name those positions? And do you have people in mind? Has the interview process begun?
Tom, I'll name them when I put them there. Here's the deal. Here's what's important, Tom. What's important is not how quickly I do this, but how well I do it. The first thing about doing this right now and the way that I'm doing it, I'm learning every single position that's open right now. And I'm involved in all of it. Now, is that a lot of work? Trust me, it's a lot of work. I think right now I'm working on about 2.5 hours sleep. I want to make sure I put the right people in the right places. We have some great talent here. The failure has been not putting people in that best seat, you know, where I want people who can lead in the positions that they're in. So right now, we're going through a process that I haven't seen since I've been on the job, especially when it comes to exempt rank members. Instead of grabbing someone and appointing them, I want to give everybody the opportunity to sit in front of me and interview for that position. And during that process, not only will I find the right person for that job, I may find the right person for a different job. I am not going to rush this because people want to see me put a team in place. If I do it that way, I'm doing it for the wrong reason. So if criticism comes with that, I will gladly accept that criticism because internally I know what needs to be done and I want to do it the right way. Listen, if we keep doing things the same way we've done them in the past, expect the same things to continue to happen. If we're going, if we're going to be effective in changing the narrative in policing, the way that we police, and the way that we deal with crime, if we're not willing to change, then we're just going to keep spinning our wheels, and we're going to find ourselves in the same place, and we're going to get the same criticism. So I'm willing to take whatever criticism comes for being slow about appointing my team, but I guarantee you when that team is in place, they'll be awesome.
I think we can open it up to the room now.
Yes, the clearance rate on the murders, over what period of time are you coming up with a 74% clearance rate?
The past 30 days. So out of 26 murders, we've cleared 20 of them.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about these 4 priority communities that you've identified with the mayor to be, focus areas.
So here, when we talk about priority communities, we're talking about those volatile communities, those communities that need the most help right now. But what I don't want is for anyone in this room to lose focus and believe that there's not a focus on our economic engine, which is the heart of downtown, right? I clearly understand, and I've clearly heard the voices of everyone in the business community about what's going on. Not just down here, but there are some thriving areas in the city of Chicago right now. And we know that there have been a lot of robberies and things of that nature in those locations. We will have a plan, and actually we do have a plan for the business corridors, which is why I'm here today to talk to you about that and to reassure you that your businesses will be safe. We know that there's been a lot of smash and grabs, things of that nature. They have slowed down, they've decreased, but anytime we have one, we know that it leads to concern for other businesses. We will be here. So we're not just going to target those communities. We're targeting those communities in a way where we know we have to take serious resources into those complex areas. So when we look at our 35 most violent beats across the city, these are places where lives are being lost, children are impoverished, people are poor, we're dealing with mental health issues in those communities, and we have to find a way to get resources into those communities. And when we get resources into those communities, every other community is going to be less affected. So it doesn't mean that because we're looking at those 4 target locations, doesn't mean that we're ignoring everything else. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone in the room. One of the things that I felt dealing with the business community, everybody wants to reach out and everyone wants to help. And that is extremely important and very flattering to the department to know that there's support for the department, for our officers, and what we're trying to do here. And in working in partnership, I believe that we can get over this hump and we can get to the bottom of what's going on here when it comes to public safety. So I just wanted to acknowledge everybody in the room for being here. You're concerned about the city. And I know that we're concerned about how the city looks or what the effects are that the perception of crime here is having on the city. But we're going to work together. I hear you. I hear the voices in this room. And we will get to the bottom of this and we will turn this around. So I just want to say thank you for your support. So thank you.